Hey, PSYC230 students, welcome to the last week of class, week 5. All right, so one thing just want to say right up front, I haven't had a chance to grade the exam 3, but I'm going to get to that tomorrow, Saturday. But I did catch up on a bunch of other grading discussions and deep dives, and so those are in, so we're a little bit closer with some of our grades. One of the things just to be careful with, because also your grade could have jumped up a lot or could have jumped down a lot if depending on how you have your grades set, is that the research project is 15% of your grade. And so far the research project check-in, it's only worth 5 points, but it is part of that grade, and the grades in this class are by category. And so that's 15% of your grade. So if you have your grades set up as, what is my grade so far? So only grading things that have been submitted so far, your grade could have jumped up quite a bit because if you got 5 out of 5 on that, that's 100% for that 15% of your grade. That might change. Let's say you only get a 90% on the actual research project. So then that could change the overall grade. Similarly, if there was a few of you who hadn't turned in the research project check-in, and so you're getting a 0 for that, 0 out of 5. And again, that's not going to affect your grade a whole bunch at the end, but right now you're getting 0 for that 15%. So if you had been hovering in the A's, suddenly now you're down in the C's suddenly, that's why. So you can definitely still turn in the research project check-in, but I just want you to be aware that sometimes those grades are a little goofy because I do grade by percentage. So there different things are weighted differently throughout the class. So other than that, this last week we're looking at 3 more chapters. We're going to be covering 3 more test statistics. The ANOVA, which is like an acronym for analysis of variance. The second one is correlation, and the third one is chi-square. These are all very commonly used statistics, and along with the independent t-statistic and the dependent t-statistic, those 5 you are going to see all over the place. So they're really good ones to have learned in an introduction to statistics class. One thing I will say about them is that we're going to have the normal processes in terms of, each chapter will have a problem set and then also a muddiest point. The other thing I'll say is that in terms of our process of hypothesis testing, we have our 4 steps. It's going to stay the same. We're going to state our hypotheses, set our critical region, calculate, and then make a decision, reject or retain the null. That step 3 of the calculations is the main part that's going to change. And one of the things just to kind of warn you about is the ANOVA, which is the first chapter we're doing in this last section, is the longest of our test statistics in terms of calculations. So when you get to that problem set, it's going to be a number of steps. And so it is the longest. So I just want to warn you about that. But then the good side, or the good part of this, is that the last 2 chapters, correlation and chi-square, are actually shorter. And they're probably even shorter than the t-statistic. The correlation is really like 4 or 5 calculations total. The chi-square only has 1 calculation in terms of the whole thing, but then you're kind of having to work with some of the tables, maybe some calculations inside the table. So it gets a lot shorter. So you'll kind of, spend the longest in terms of the most steps for the ANOVA. The chi-square does have 2 versions, but both versions use the exact same formula. So that's what's coming up. Then we've got your research project, and based on what I saw, it looks like almost everybody is doing either an independent t-statistic, and a couple of you are doing a dependent t-statistic for your projects. I saw a lot of the data already in your descriptive statistics deep dive. So many of you already have the data. You're ready to plug it in and go. So one of the things I just might suggest is to go ahead and do that. So most again are doing the independent t-statistic. Just follow the instructions in the deep dive to do the Jamovi version, Jamovi portion of the project. and then do your hand calculations based on chapter 10, the independent t-test. And then all you have to do is write your paper. For the couple of you who are doing the dependent t-statistic, that one's due on Sunday, but hopefully you'll get some practice there. And then again, just follow that with your own data, and you'll be able to run the dependent t-statistic on that. And then again, you can do your own hand calculations and then write the paper. So one of the things that I want to point out for you regarding this is in Canvas, if we go to the checklist, there is, in terms of going to the research project itself, so you can either go in the modules or here. Again, you've got your 3 parts here. So this is when you turn this in, you're going to turn in 3 things: a written report, which is 1 to 2 pages, your own hand calculations for the appropriate test statistic, and the Jamovi printout. And so I want to just fix that while I'm here. So those 3 things are what you're going to have to turn in. Now, in terms of that, some of you might be a little concerned about the written report and all of this. So there are a couple examples down here. So this first one is based on a study that used the independent t-statistic, which is what, again, the vast majority of you are using. So you can see here's their 1 to 2 page paper. It ended up being 1.5 pages. This person's discussion was very long. You don't need it to be that long. But so there you have the paper. And then you've got the hand calculations. So they took photos or did a scan of these. And again, for some of that stuff, just know that there are some scanning apps for your phone. Actually, iPhones have it built into the Notes program. So Apple Notes has actually like this little camera icon. Click on that and it will scan any picture and turn it into a PDF. So those work pretty nice. Then you can upload that. But so there's the hand calculations, and then there's their printout. This one is a printout from another program called NCSS. So you're just going to use the same kind of printout that we did for the deep dive assignment, in this case for the independent T. And for those of you doing the dependent T statistic, use the same printout that we do from that one. So it doesn't have to have these graphs or anything. It's not going to look exactly like this. So that's one example. That's a PDF, but so just so you can kind of see what it looks like. And then you can just kind of follow this template here in terms of how they write it up. Now, that's one paper. And then the other one is actually a Word document. And it's a Word document partly, again, it's a good example here. So Lindsay did this one where this is her entire paper. And it really can be this brief. This really covers everything that's needed in the research report. So that's the page of that. And then what's kind of interesting with hers is she went in and wanted her calculations to look good. So she programmed them into Microsoft Word. Now, I kept this as a Word document. So you could download this. And then if you're doing the independent T statistic, you can just plug your numbers right into this one if you want. It's not going to calculate it for you. You'll have to do all the calculations, but it is a nice, neat version of the calculation. So you're welcome to do that, but you can also do that thing where you do it by hand, write them out, and then take a picture or scan it. So this one doesn't have the statistical software printout, but it does have those 2 components. So just make sure that you also add that, the printout. Okay, so you've got your 3 parts. I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of those examples because they end up being like templates for how to write up the report. Other than that, the other thing I wanted to say is that the final exam, it mostly covers the last 3 chapters. So our exams are always kind of broken up into 2 parts, the multiple choice and then the computational. The computational is only focused on the last 3 chapters. So you will see a hypothesis test for ANOVA, pretty much start to finish. You'll see a hypothesis test for the correlation, and then you'll see a hypothesis test for the chi-square. Those will have the steps written out. So it's not like a 20-point question where you're sort of on your own with all the steps. It asks you to calculate the parts. So it'll have that. The one thing that you are on your own with, though, is at the end of each, there's a question that asks you simply, report it as you would report it for the literature. So we've had those, we've highlighted that in each of the chapters, how to write it for the literature. So it's usually like 2 sentences, 1 to 2 sentences. Sometimes, you know, it might involve like a table, but for the ANOVA, it would involve a table, and we don't need the table. So you'll see on the exam, it asks, don't worry about the table. But so you're going to have to type that in. So again, I'm kind of emphasizing those research reports because that's the part that you all need to be able to read better in the future. And then, but the multiple choice section, so the computational is just the last 3 chapters. The multiple choice basically goes back to chapter 8. So all of the t-statistics. Now, it does emphasize chapter 8, and mostly what it's emphasizing there is the idea of the whole idea of hypothesis testing. Critical regions. What is a critical region? What do we do when we get a result in the critical region? What does rejecting the null mean? What is the null hypothesis? What is a type 1 error? What is a type 2 error? All of those kind of questions. That's going to show up on the final. So there's going to be some multiple choice. Those tend to be the questions most people struggle with on the final. To help you out, those questions were also on exam 2. So go back and look at some of the multiple choice from exam 2. The ones that are focused on chapter 8, those are ones that you might see something like that on the final. So understand what the right answer is, understand why it's the right answer, and why the other answers are wrong. So definitely check those out. Also, there'll be some multiple choice that are kind of focused a little bit on correlation, because correlation tends to be the most misinterpreted statistic out there. And then some of the multiple choice will focus on all of the chapters 8 and on, all the test statistics, and again, focusing on the report. But it will give you like a snippet of the report and then ask you some questions. So it'll say something, you know, this was a study and it was reported as this, and then give you a quote. And then it'll say, how many people were in this study? Or did they reject the null? Or did they retain the null? It'll ask you questions like that. So it's more about how to read those reports. So you want to be comfortable with all of the test statistics of how they're reported and what the numbers mean and so on. In terms of that, there is some help on the exam or final exam review video. And I'll go over that in a second. The other thing is there's also some multiple choices that kind of like a 20-point question. They're a paragraph describing a research study and then a table of data. But these only ask you as a multiple choice question, what test statistics should you use? You've now learned 7 test statistics. The z-score, single sample t, independent t, dependent t, you'll learn ANOVA, you'll learn correlation, and you'll learn chi-square. So those are the 7 that you've learned. So from there, you want to be able to determine which one you should use. And so there, again, in the final exam review video, it walks you through how to do that. So I want to just show you a couple things here, just where to find that. So let me go back here, and I want to go back farther. So I want to go to the resources for section 4. In the resources for section 4, you will see the final exam review video, along with final exam review slides and the decision flowchart. Those are, again, the slides that are used in that review. So definitely check that out. That will help you with the multiple choice question as far as how to pick the appropriate test statistic. It will also, I'm pretty sure at the end I go back and I give you some examples of the multiple choice questions where it's like a snippet of the report, because also in these slides, what you'll see is so here's like an example. Here's the paragraph, here's the data. You have to figure out what statistic it is. And it turns out it's the independent t statistic. Well, this all again shows you how to write it in the literature. So it gives you an example. So you should have 3 or 4 or 5 examples of this by now. There's usually one in the lecture notes. There's usually one in the calculation video. There's usually one in your problem set. And now there's another one in the review slides here. So that's basically what's coming. So you've got your typical problem set and muddiest point. you've got the exam, you've got the research project, and the other thing is there is a discussion this week. And again, hopefully, as you've seen, now that I've caught up more on the grading, is that I'm a pretty easy grader on that stuff. I'm just asking you to do it, do what I ask, and then I'll give you pretty much full points. It's there to help you deepen your understanding. So I'm not necessarily testing to make sure you understand it. I'm trying to help you understand it in those assignments. So that's what's coming. Also, there you'll see that there's a link in a couple places to do the course evaluations for this class. And I very much ask you to do those because I really very much care and I use those. And please be honest. Tell me what works. Tell me what doesn't. This is the first time I'm teaching. This class is a 5-week class, and so I want to get your feedback. What worked, what didn't, and what suggestions do you have? So otherwise, as always, please reach out to me if you have any questions. Also, I want to remind you that Jay is available for tutoring. And otherwise, good luck this last week, and you guys will be done very shortly.